All right, well, welcome into another episode of Views from the Bridge, your second favorite podcast about your favorite team, the Philadelphia Union. And I'm here with Chuck tonight. My name is Justin. Chuck, how are you doing tonight?
I'm surviving in this preparation for the Gold Cup, but I'm also just wondering why is MLS playing soccer games this week?
Because who cares about the rest of the world? We just need to play soccer games.
It's funny because at the beginning of everything, it was like, oh, we're gonna take a break for like the Club World Cup and the Gold Cup because MLS teams are taking part in it and CONCACAF has a lot of MLS presence. That break did happen before all of the tournaments happened.
Yes, yeah. I don't really understand why we're playing soccer this week either, but it is what it is, and the Union have their first real game. I guess I'll say it that way. The first real game of June in this weekend against Charlotte. And I guess for all the times that we've said, why are we playing this team again? At least it's a team we haven't played yet this year.
This is true. I mean, at least like the next couple in Charlotte and Chicago will be teams that the Union hasn't actually played this year.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess let's go back. We haven't recorded in a little bit. Life got a little bit crazy for the first little bit of June here, but the Union played 9 games over the course of the month of May, went unbeaten over that time period, which going into the month, I would not have said that was going to be the thing that was going to happen. So the fact that they came out of the month unscathed, other than a couple draws, is pretty impressive.
Yeah, no, I mean like it's weird, but this is the best team in the East by every metric. Because like even if you want to just put like goal difference as what your metric is, like plus 14 at this stage of the season is nuts. And I mean, yeah, Miami has a game in hand, but even if they win it, they're still 2 points behind the Union for first in the East. Um, and then in the overall landscape of things, the Union are only 1 point behind Vancouver for Supporter Shield. And like, who knows after what's happened with them if the wheels are about to fall off.
Yeah, it's a wild thing because I think, thinking context of our podcast and context of what we've talked about this season, the Union trade away again Daniel Gazdag, and obviously the uproar from the fan base is justified when you trade away your leading scorer, leading assister, leading man of, the midfield, all of that. And then it just doesn't, they had that one blip, I guess, at this point against NYCFC, and then they really haven't dropped off form since then. And so it is interesting, like you judge trades by the results after the trades, and to this point, I mean, there's still a lot of season to go, a lot of time left, but it is interesting that the Union seem to not necessarily even have won the trade, because Columbus is doing well as well, but um the Union seem to have gotten that trade right in some sense to this point.
Yeah, I mean that's still a weird one because it was like pretty clear that Gazdag just didn't fit Carnell's system, and so in that sense, you do understand why it was a trade that needed to be done because, like, with this kind of pressing and how they move the ball, like, he just wasn't the type of player for it. Um, now with where they are, it's weird because, like, when the transfer window reopens, you would honestly still like to see them use that money to, like, add something to get them over the top. Because we have at least seen enough signs that this team is going to find it tough against the top opposition in the East, as we already saw with the draw against Columbus. And I still still quite a. I mean, it is nitpicking because it's Miami, but still quite a blip in not getting all 3 points from playing Miami.
Yeah. So let's go back to that game and kind of the result there. Miami, what were we up 3-1 at some point in that game, and Miami scores 2 goals to tie the game, kind of in the last, I don't know, 15 minutes of the game or so. I it's one of those games for me that it's not the result itself, it's how the result happened, and it's how the result, occurred, and how we got to the 3-3 that bothers me. But then some of it I can set aside too, because it's like that last goal probably shouldn't have happened, because Kai Wagner's rolling around, writhing around in pain by the corner flag after getting two-handed shoved in the face off the ball, and the ref forgot he had a whistle, I guess.
Yep. No, that's the joys of not getting preferential treatment.
But it wasn't a bad game. It was like 10 minutes of the game was bad. It was not like, oh, this sucked. It was like the what was it? The 85th to the 95th minute or something like that just sunk us in that game.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that's always like the weird situation though, where it's like just being bad for 15 minutes is enough to ruin 75 minutes of what was a great game. And I mean, luckily they followed that up with getting 3 points, but like those are just the moments when it's like, okay, if you really want to like win a tournament, you need to be able to close out those games, because you're gonna see all of these teams, and at least MLS playoffs. Like, luckily, if you want to win the Open Cup, you don't have to beat any of these teams because they're not in it.
Yeah. Yeah. You would have to think, I'll get there later. I don't know anything else about the Miami game that I thought it was a great game. I thought the first half was obviously a splendid half, and I thought the Union played really, really well in that half of the game. I also wonder if we win that game if Andre Blake is in goal and not Andrew Rick.
Yeah,
There's a chance we still win that game.
there's unfortunately been a couple of those moments, and that's just, I mean, that's just always the difference of having Andre Blake, and unfortunately, we've been having him less and less recently. But like, definitely, when it matters, you want Andre Blake in net.
Yeah. It's different though than Bendik or some of the other
But
backups
yeah,
we've
no,
seen.
Rick's at least not gonna like go out of his way to lose a game. There's just saves that Andre Blake makes that a slightly above average keeper, because Andrew Rick is probably about slightly above average, which is still pretty significant praise considering his age. But like, that just he won't make. And when it comes to just awareness in the box, there's major differences between them because of the reps that Andre Blake has. But Rick is improving.
Yeah, and I think Rick is a guy that I'm excited about long term. But even in the short term, it's a lot better than the backup options we've had for the last couple of years, and so I'm just not all that upset about the fact that he's there and what he's doing and all that kind of stuff. And none of the goals against Miami would I've said. None of them were gaffes on his part. Like, none of them were like, oh, that was a gaffe by Rick. It was more just a very above average keeper in Andre Blake maybe gets to some of those where a slightly above average just doesn't. And so I think, I have no problems with Andrew Rick, and again, I really have no problems with that game. It was just like we fell asleep for 10 minutes at the end of the game and kind of gave it away. But everything that happened leading up to that point was great. But when you're playing Miami, like you said, you can't fall asleep for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. You got to figure out how to stay in it the whole game and close them out. The Union came back the next game against Toronto, and I thought for sure that was the game that was going to end our unbeaten streak. And then the Union kind of did to Toronto what Miami did to them a couple nights before. And all of a sudden decided in the second half, like, oh yeah, we're here and we're playing soccer and this is a team we need to beat. And they came out and beat them in the second half. So again, it was not, that was probably the opposite. It wasn't a great game. And then the last half of the game or last third of the game was much better than the rest of it, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, that game, like, those are honestly the ones that are just like reassuring to, like, oh, this is a supporter shield chasing team. Because they very easily even could have just like went for a draw and been like, I mean, we're fine. We didn't lose. It's okay. But like continually pushing even after getting the equalizer in the 86th minute, and then of course Kai Wagner getting the winner. Just like you need results like that to push a team over a long season.
Yeah. And it wasn't a terrible, if I'm thinking correctly about the games, it wasn't a terrible game. The Union had chances kind of all throughout the games. It just nothing went. And then finally in the last 10 minutes, like, they got a couple to go. And it was just like, okay, we're good. Like you said, it's that reassurance of like, oh yeah, we can win games when it's tight, when it's close, when we're not playing the best that we can. And so, yeah, can't complain about that one too much.
You can't complain about the next one though.
You can complain about the next one. I'll be real honest. I didn't watch the game against Dallas, but sitting there watching this, updates and checking Twitter throughout the game and all that kind of stuff, it did not seem like a very fun game.
I watched more of this game than I would have liked to, and I mean we talk a lot about how when the Union go up a man, they're just not able to do anything. And this was that. Because, yeah, being up a man for more than half of the game and looking closer to losing that game from random Anderson Julio counters than you are looking to winning that game is very concerning. Like, I'm actually scared to look at like what the expected goals are from that game, because it was just like it was just like almost shooting for the sake of shooting, which is how you take 24 shots and only put one on net, despite again being up a man for the majority of the game.
Yeah, it's not great that result.
Oh god. So I do have the XG in front of me now. So Dallas with their 2 shots on target, they're at an XG of 0.55. And the Union created one of 1.93, which is honestly higher than I thought that it would have been. Based on the fact that about half of those shots came from outside the box, but most of that came quite literally from Damiani, who took 8 shots himself for an XG of 0.83.
Yeah. I think what I kind of feel about that game is and it's sort of what I feel about Toronto too. You're on your 8th and 9th game of the month, and it gets hard at that point to have the mental clarity, strength, stamina to continue to play at a high level. And so I think I'm just glad, like the Toronto game, we got the 2 late goals and won. the Dallas game, we didn't give them a goal and we didn't lose. We still got a point in that game. I go, all right, like we did what we needed to do, and then we got our 2-week break, and hopefully, regardless of who the Union actually put out on the field for this game against Charlotte, we can talk about that in a minute, but you would hope they would come back with a lot more energy and a lot more like, all right, cool, we've gotten our rest, we have been here, and now we can play some soccer.
I mean, the good thing, or maybe the bad thing, depending on how you want to look at it, most of the players who actually started against Dallas, except I think Gene Jock and Nathan Ariel, are available for this game.
Yeah. You're in a good spot. Well, before we get there and kind of move on to the Charlotte game, we're kind of at the point. I just thought about this. We're kind of at the point where we're halfway through the season, because we're 17 games in, 10 wins, 4 draws, 3 losses, a goal differential of 14 points, 14 goals, and then 34 points on the season. Like you mentioned, we're 1 point off the Supporters Shield race. We're still, even if Miami wins their game in hand, we still got 2 points on them. If, and so we're at a spot kind of in the season where we're actually in pretty good shape for where we want to be and all that kind of stuff. My like kind of initial thoughts on this first half of the season and kind of what's transpired so far is it's kind of the life of being a Union fan in a lot of ways. It's like I'm not sure if I believe in this team, but they're putting some good results up. Oh, there's a couple bad results. We're not sure about those. Oh wait, there's some good. Oh, weird trade, and then ultimately we're still sitting there in first place in the conference, and so I can't be mad about where we're sitting, and I feel like we put ourselves in a good spot for the rest of the year. And it's just like, all right, so then let's go do what we can the rest of the year to get as many points as we can, and then kind of see where we end up end of the year.
Yeah, I would say, initially I would have been happy with, just avoiding the play-in game and being top 7 in the East. Now you probably raise that to like needing to be top 4, just to guarantee mostly home field advantage. But like, can't complain when the blips usually lead to draws.
Yeah, for sure. No, I completely agree. You want to have seasons where, yeah, it gets harder when you have the seasons that the blips turn into losses or bad losses and all that kind of stuff. But when you're close to one of the highest scoring teams on the season, you're defensively, you're stout and fairly good, but you're scoring a lot, so sometimes the goals you give up don't really matter. You feel like you're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, I still can't believe how good the defensive record's been, because like it doesn't look good. It just somehow happens, and then next thing you know, it's like, oh, only one team in the East has given up fewer goals than the Union. Also, somehow that's New England.
Yeah, weird stats. There was another soccer podcast I was listening to. I was listening to Soccer Over Gotham, and so they were talking about where Gotham is in the NWSL table, and they're sitting ninth, I think, at the moment, and it's interesting because they're the only team in the bottom half of the NWSL table with a positive goal differential. And then there's a couple teams above them that have negative goal differentials. And so they were just saying, well, at some point it's got to turn around, right? Because if you've got a positive goal differential, at some point you got to win more games than you lose. Do
you?
I mean, in some ways, yes. Not
yeah,
always.
No, I mean, I know. I get that, like, in theory, that is how it works. But, like, even with stats, it's funny because stats can be out of whack for an entire season, and then nothing will happen to actually like change that, and then you end up missing the playoffs with a positive goal differential, which is
Yeah,
actually
you
what
still
like that is what like New England might end up doing.
yeah. And it's like it depends how you lose games. Like it depends like your mental, if you lose games that you lose the game, tight, and then when you win big, then you might have a positive goal differential where you're losing the games that you lose are 1-0. The games that you win are 4-1, then all of a sudden you have a positive goal differential, but worse
Yeah,
results.
I mean, actually, something just like for a state of the Eastern Conference in general, something like pretty damn impressive is that the top 11 teams in the East all have positive goal differentials. And like only a couple, Charlotte and Cincinnati, have like slightly positive where it's one. Everyone else is like three or more. And then you just have the bottom four of DC, Atlanta, Toronto, and Montreal that's conceding left and right.
Yeah, yeah, it is interesting how that works. Um, so next couple matches, we only have 3 games in the month of June after playing 9 in the month of May. We have 3 games in the month of June. We play Charlotte this weekend, and then we get another 10-day, 11-day break, and then we play Chicago midweek in a couple weeks, and then come back on the weekend against Columbus. Um, it is interesting to think about. Like, all right, you only have 3 games to gain points this month, and so it feels like the results do matter to keep pressure on the top of the East in some ways, but it's probably not a false statement that almost everybody only has a couple, unless you're Seattle, LFC, or Miami.
Yeah, I
You
was to
know,
say it doesn't help that Miami just doesn't play MLS games, so you'll
yeah,
end up in a situation where now they'll have like 4 games in hand on the rest of the league. Like, I mean, luckily those only matter so much just because you do still have to win them, and points are more important than a game in hand.
yeah, for sure, for sure. I think we talked about that last season at some point that you can't take points off the board, but you know, you can lose. If you don't have the points and then you lose the games, it doesn't matter that you had the games in hand. So I think that's true. What do you expect for this game against Charlotte? I mean, it's like kind of weird lineup, I guess. Ure's out for another 10 days, but that's getting hopefully to the Chicago game, and we may see him back. Baribo is looking like a 10 to 12 day absence, so that's looking close to being back for Chicago or Columbus. You have Jean Jacques, Harriel, Quinn Sullivan all out on international, Andre Blake all out on international duty. I don't know. What does this lineup look like for
Yeah.
you?
I mean, there's some guys. It's a Ben Bender revenge game. Because there's no way that you can't put him in midfield, considering there is no midfield. I'm just at least happy that Patrick Ajiman won't be there for Charlotte since he's on the Gold Cup squad. Tim Ream also won't be there for Charlotte. So I think this is probably a game where like both teams are just pretty happy with a boring draw.
Yeah, I think. Well, and I saw too. I mean, I think Charlotte actually has 4 or 5 players out on international duty, different places. So do you do? Yeah, I mean they have a host of players out. We've got a host of players out. Um, so I think it's still winnable. It's not like you're playing a full strength. It's not like playing you against a full strength team where now you got to like beat somebody's A team with your B team. It's more like both teams have players missing, and we kind of see what happens from there.
Yeah, and usually that just ends up being very, very ugly games. But it's like, I mean, it's at least luckily most players will be back by Chicago, because that's like you definitely want to win that game more than necessarily Charlotte, because you like I I don't want to let the Fire into the playoffs, because I feel like just if they make it, they're gonna be a problem. but there's at least like enough going on down there in the East that they should make it right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever. I feel like it's kind of one of those situations. I feel like when you have this much time in a month, you're only playing 3 games this month. When you have this much time and you're in the middle of the season, it's not often in the middle of the season do you get a month where you only have 3 games. Like I think, at the start of the season before all the midweek games come in, like all of a sudden, you have a week between games and you might have 4 games in a month. But this one, it feels like, all right, there's only 3 games this month, and 2 of them are separated by 10 days. And so it feels like as a coach, you should be able to coach your team well enough and get the rest that you need to win all 3 games. The Columbus game is the game I'm not sure about, but like the other 2, you definitely, you feel like you want to come out of this month with 7 points. But I think
You would hope so.
To your point, 5 might be good enough. If you get a boring draw here and then still beat Chicago and then get another draw against Columbus, like I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think just like with how much time there is between games, like if Charlotte wins like 3-0, that's a problem. And if you lose to Chicago, that's a problem because there's just like also just with these weird gaps, there's too much time to think in between games.
Yeah. You feel like you need to prep. Like you need to prep for the Chicago game. Like it's like you have 10 days, and so either if they lose, it's either because the players are rusty because they just haven't played enough games or enough time or whatever. So that could be the case, or it's just bad coaching. And you didn't figure out
most
how to play
coaches would
against them.
most coaches would rather be playing at least a game weekly.
Yeah. And I think players probably do too, with some exceptions to that. But it's like, yeah, you want to be playing on a regular basis to like keep the chemistry and the, all of that there.
Which it is funny that, like, of course, after Chicago, you have to play Columbus on 4 days rest, but that's just fun MLS scheduling.
But you still have 10 days to prep for both of those games. So
yeah, no, I just
be
mean
able
the
to figure
fact
out
that
how to do that.
Yeah, it's just like, why isn't it 7-7?
Yeah. And then you do have, another week after that before you play again. And so, but on, play Nashville. So you do have some time after that too. So it's like, I just feel like you should be able to strategize for both those games, figure out the strategy you want to play, and then get your lineups right and all that kind of stuff, and then still win both games. But yeah, why isn't 7-7? That's a good question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree with you on that, though.
Anything else you want to talk about as we kind of lead into these games, or get into kind of playing again after having a little bit of a break here after the end of May?
I mean, I feel like does Ty Bariba win the Golden Boot?
Does Ty Bariba win the Golden Boot? I think he has a legitimate shot at winning it, especially if we can replace the assists that should have come from Gazdag. If we can figure out how to replace that, I'm not saying we need a total like Gazdag type player, but like if we can get somebody with good service.
Would you not say Quinn Sullivan has in a way replaced those?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I'm just saying I think we could still. I'm not upset at all about the way that Vasilev has played, for the most part on the other side of the field.
Yeah, he's not an attacker.
No. And so that's where I'm like, if we could figure out a person on that side of the field who can balance the field out a little bit, I guess, or provide some more offensive spark from that side of the field. And it's not bad. It's so hard because it's not like Frankie Westfield has been good getting up and down the flank, like Vasilev has been okay,
Yeah, these
Like,
are all good problems to have.
yeah, Lukic and Jean-Jacques have figured out how to get in the attack, both of them at different times. So it's, yeah, I don't know.
So
Yes,
yeah,
I do think he
so I
has a
mean,
shot. I do think Baribo has a shot at winning the Golden Boot.
what's interesting? So right now there are 8 players with 10 or more goals at MLS. As of right now, Baribo is the one outrunning his XG the most because he's only expected to have 8.33 goals and he has 13 from that. Based on the way that he plays, that absolutely makes sense, and he will continue to outrun his XG for the remainder of the season, and there's nothing that anyone can do about that because he is a good finisher that gets into good areas and only needs like one shot where some goal scorers need five. Um, but what's interesting is the fact that behind him is Sam Surridge, Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, Lionel Messi, Kevin Danke, Hugo Coopers, Brian White, and Dejan Jovetic, which is a hell of a list of MLS goal scorers. And I'm curious if like at some point, because it feels like we're so close to Damiani getting it going, and I just like wonder if like the biggest detriment to him winning the Golden Boot is the fact that someone else on the Union just goes on a scoring streak. Because with a lot of these other guys, like they are just perpetually gonna be the top options for their team. Um, and also Brian White has played the fewest games of any of these guys as well, with only playing 12. And if Vancouver is to win the Supporters' Shield, he might need to score 30 goals.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about that is I actually did see a post on Reddit today. 95% of what I read on Reddit is ridiculous, but this post was actually pretty insightful, and it was giving kind of goal scoring, the Union's goal scoring over the past 4 seasons. And it was just interesting because, I think we all complain sometimes about goal scoring, and there was times last year where we definitely complained about it, and if we only had a goal scorer and all this kind of stuff. But I think what made Carranza as good as he was having Gazdag in the midfield, um, to take some of the pressure off of Carranza. And so I wonder if the same would be true in some sense
Yeah,
for Baribo if Damiani decides, yeah, I'm going to score double digit goals this season, and starts to heat up, and all of a sudden that they're both being dangerous. And if we would buy another attacking midfielder who can actually put a ball in frame and all that kind of stuff, then all of a sudden Baribo is not getting covered as tight as he's covered now. And I think he starts banging more goals in if he's not the focal point of the attack
yeah,
in the
no,
way
I
that
mean,
he is now.
I would absolutely agree with that. Like, it is always good to have, shocker, it's always good to have more people who can score goals, and like that would only like provide just more of an option for how the Union set up over the course of everything. But that I would say it is certainly better when that player is a midfielder than a striker, just because you can still try and stack the box when it's a striker. But if someone is coming from deep and scoring, then you're like, oh, I have to defend out almost to the halfway line, and then like, what do I do at that point?
Yeah, and I do think that's part of the reason why Baribo has been so successful, at least in the month of May, over the past, like, where some of the goals have come from over the past month, is I feel like Jean-Jacques has figured out how to attack from his position, or Carnell has figured out how to get Jean-Jacques in better attacking positions from deep in midfield, or they do that kind of late game switch of bringing Bedoya on, which allows Jean-Jacques to move further up the field. And I feel like that has made kind of the whole attack dangerous because when you got a guy who's running from midfield and all of a sudden just, oh, he's the furthest player up the field in the middle of the box. Like, it's hard. It becomes very difficult as a team to defend that. I think back to the game, the Pittsburgh Philadelphia game, and like when Jean Jacques got in that game, um, you know, that's where I feel like it really unraveled Pittsburgh in a lot of ways, is because Jean Jacques was figuring out how to make runs from deep, which USL teams just don't do, or they just don't have that level of player who can do that. So I feel like that's been beneficial. But if you have somebody who's starting a little further up the field than what Jean Jacques is, you create a whole different look that now center backs have to think differently about who and what they're defending, or what space and what player and all that kind of stuff, which I just think opens up the whole offense. And that, again, this is not my thought is not a diatribe against Vasilev and what Vasilev has done this season and even over the last month. But I do think that with $4 million, I feel like we could find a player that creates more chances than what Vasilev does.
You would hope. And also, just when it comes to squad building in general, it's always better to have a player like Vasilev coming off the bench than it is to need him to go 90 minutes, especially since he can play multiple positions.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It is the guy that I feel the worst for on the Union roster right now is Jesus Bueno. And I know he hasn't done he's not the best soccer player, but I feel like every year we bring in a guy in front of him. It's like he's been here for it feels like he's been here forever now, and he may not have even been here that long, but it feels like he's been here forever. And it's like, well, last year we played this system, and between Flock and Martinez and all these people, it was like Bueno never saw the field. Now we bring in Jean Jacques and Lukic, and now Bueno can't see unless one of them are gone on international duty, Bueno doesn't see the field. And it's like, man, this guy's just got to get a break where he can actually get on the field.
And this is why that level of Union midfielder always ends up elsewhere.
Exactly. Yeah, it is. I just feel bad for him. It's like, man, he could do stuff, and he just doesn't ever get the chance to do stuff. And I think more than other people, it's like Raffanello is sort of in the same situation, but Raffanello probably doesn't necessarily, based on what he's done on the field when he's there, I don't know that he necessarily deserves more time.
I don't feel bad for the homegrowns that aren't playing right now, despite the fact that it is funny that part of the reason that the decision was made to move on from Jim Curtin was Jim Curtin determining that the homegrowns couldn't start MLS games. And outside of Frankie Westfield, homegrowns aren't starting MLS games. And obviously, no one's complaining about what Carnell's done. I just find it really funny with that being one of the core reasons behind firing Jim Curtin, when you could have literally just said, things are stale and we need a change.
Yeah, it is. Winning covers a lot of things too. And so there still might be part of the ownership group or whoever, has that opinion of the homegrown should see the field more. They probably still have that opinion, but when you're winning games,
it also probably helps that that 50% sell-on clause on Jack McGlynn is going to end up funding this team for 3 years.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I did I will admit, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, but I will admit I didn't watch either of the US's games. That
good. Don't watch the Gold Cup. Stay away.
I'm hearing we're completely atrocious. but I did see a tweet that somebody made. It wasn't anybody big. It was just a random tweet that I saw that like somebody was like Sullivan and McGlynn look like they belong, but that's about it. And it was just like it made my Union fan heart happy to
Oh
hear
yeah,
that those two guys got the shout out, even though McGlynn's not here anymore. But what was funny about
yeah.
that tweet was they spelled McGlynn's last name wrong.
That also checks out. I mean, in 2020, in like 2022, I like after getting knocked out of the World Cup, I had to predict like what the 2026 roster would be, and I put McGlynn in midfield for that roster. Of course, I still thought that he would either be playing for the Union or in Europe at that time, and I'm aware that I'm also more bullish on what Jack McGlynn can do than the average person in America writing about soccer. But like the rest of the world is currently figuring out what Union fans already knew. But again, just don't ask him to play defense.
Yeah, that's what I think on one of the like the preview shows I'd done with a different podcast earlier in the season. We got talking afterwards, and they were like, "So tell us about Jack." It wasn't it wasn't Houston related, but the person was like, "Just tell me about Jack McGlynn and like what." And I was like, "I mean, he's a great player. He just can't play defense. Like he's just not a good defender. But if you can figure out a way to get him in a spot where he's got a bunch of defense behind him, like." He can hit a pass and he can put a ball in frame and he can
Yeah,
unlock your
that's why
attack. But like,
Houston playing him at central defensive midfielder to start the season was one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
like, no, that's not his position. He's not a six and never will be. Maybe late in his career when he finally figures out how to play defense, but right now he's not a six. Yeah. It's good to see all those guys there. You just wish they were getting better results. That's what makes me sad. It's
But yeah,
like,
no,
oh,
it was so sad to see a lineup including Mark McKenzie, Nathan Harriel, Quinn Sullivan be down 4-0 in the first half to Switzerland. It's like, oh, look at all these. Oh, yeah.
no, not those guys. Not those guys. Uh any thoughts on I think I was thinking about this podcast today and I was thinking kind of opinion wise what I would think about it. Would you be opposed to um the Union finding a center back in this transfer window?
I would love for the Union to find a center back in this transfer window. I'm terrified every time I see Nathan Harriel line up at center back, and I don't understand like why we keep doing it. I mean, I know in a lot of cases like you have to, but like even when Glesnes is available, you're still lining Nathan Harriel up at center back sometimes, and it's like do we have to? Like you can admit that he's potentially lost the right back spot to Frankie Westfield, and like figure out what you're gonna do with him at that point, but like if you're not going to play a back three, I just really don't want to see him at center back.
Yeah. I go back and forth because I'm like, all right, Glavinovic is going to be back at some point in time. And you have to think that's your best option. It's like, all right, then I feel pretty
But,
comfortable of like Glesnes, Glavinovic, and Makanya. But
well, is Glesnes one of your starting center backs next year?
no, he's not.
So in that case, buy a center back.
Can you find a center back? Can you find a starting level center back right now?
Probably. I don't know what that necessarily like looks like, but I would say
Yeah.
like probably.
Yeah, maybe.
Like that's
I
that's
mean,
something where realistically you could probably find an MLS trade partner for one.
yeah, I think part of my deal with whether Glesnes is a starter next season is how does Glavinovic develop and get used to MLS, and can he stay healthy the rest of the year after he comes back? And if he develops, stays healthy, and seems to acclimate to MLS well, then I could see a situation where that's your 3 center backs and you go find a veteran center back to be the fourth backup, play your Open Cup games type deal. And you kind of ride with that. I could see that situation. I could also see, hey, they did ship Elliott this season. I could see them shipping Glesnes in the off season. But then, yeah, you are in a situation where either this window or the off season window, you almost still have to bring in 2 center backs and not just one. So it kind of depends how many center backs and when you want to bring them in.
Yeah, which that is a tough question to answer.
Because I honestly wouldn't mind a situation where your primary center backs next year are Glivinovic and Makanya, and then you still have Glesnes in. That way you can do a little bit more rotation of those guys. But I don't want a situation where Nathan Harriel is playing center back. And you also feel like my question going into this window opening up is you now have 3 right backs who could all start in this league.
And Baza was supposed to be like gone last season. Like they really like backed themselves into a corner there, still having him on the roster. And like that probably is like your biggest in MLS trade cachet is seeing who needs a right back, because like you're not going to trade a homegrown.
Yeah, you're not going to trade Westfield. So you either and you're probably not going to trade Harriel at this point because he can play center back.
And also, like you do, just because Westfield's so young, you do have to like just plan for the potential point that he runs into a wall at some point this season.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Yeah. So it is interesting queries for this team to figure out the rest of the season.
But I mean, as of right now, from even things that we've discussed, all signs point to there doesn't need to be a ton of like summer transfer activity, but there needs to be summer transfer activity.
Yeah. I think it's almost, for me, I'd love to see them add a piece at every level, like every phase of the game. So I'd like to see them add a center back. I'd like to see them add a midfielder. I would like Chris Donovan gone.
But he can't go to a USL team finally unless they like sign an 18-year-old striker.
Yes. So that's where I'm
he might have to wait until the off season.
Yeah. But it would be nice to have a fourth striker that's actually decent and can put the ball in the back of the net. But yeah,
at least he works hard.
But it's nice to not be in a desperate situation. Like that's the thing, is we're not in a desperate situation of like, we need to add this piece, otherwise it's all gonna fall apart. But it would be nice to add some pieces between now and the end of the season, or now and the end of the window.
Yeah, I mean, this is the point where you kind of like almost wish that the Union went for like big name designated players, because someone like that would put the team over the top and actually like make you feel comfortable about them winning a trophy this season. But like that's obviously not gonna happen.
A 6-month loan for Paxton Ayrton?
I wouldn't be against that. I also don't know how much that would actually help this team.
I know it probably wouldn't actually help this team as much as I want it to, but it's a fun thought. It's a fun thought. All right, well, that's what we think. Let us know what you think. You can find us at VFTB Pod all over the internet. We'd love to hear kind of what your thoughts on this team are and how things are shaping up for the rest of the season, what you want to see the Union do in the transfer window, and how soundly and quickly you think the men's national team is going to be eliminated from the Gold Cup. That's probably what we want to know your thoughts on. Other than that, let us know kind of what you're thinking about, and if we can talk about anything you want us to talk about, we'll talk about it. And so let us know. But until after the Charlotte game, we'll talk to you again and come to you with more Union content very, very soon.